It's midday in Nigeria. Welcome to Lunchtime Politics, reaching you live from our global headquarters here in the nation's commercial nerve center, Lagos. I'm Jeffrey Uzama. The program starts right now. Former Vice President of Ghana advocates politics of inclusivity to strengthen Africa's fragile democracy. President Bola Tinubu to announce a compact initiative to drive and promote more energy for the African continent. And the first female speaker of the Lagos State House of Assembly takes charge, resumes officially amid support by members of the House. Impeached Speaker Mudashiru Obasa absent at the Assembly. As again, welcome to the program. It's your access pass to what's happening in the politics and the polity at midday. Let's begin with the presidency, where President Bola Tinubu is set to announce a dynamic compact initiative to help push the drive to provide more energy for the African continent. The special advisor on public communications and orientation to President Tinubu, Sunday Dare, disclosed this on the sidelines of the ongoing African Heads of State Energy Summit taking place in Tanzania. The special advisor to the president on energy, who is also in Tanzania, outlined some of the plans of the federal government to ensure targeted energy subsidies to the poor and vulnerable in the society.
Second element of moving to cost-reflective tariff is making sure that we continue to have targeted subsidies to the poor and vulnerable, because the way we have them now, almost everybody, the more energy you consume, the more subsidies you get. That isn't the intention. Our intention is to make sure that the poor and vulnerable who have limited capacity to pay continue to enjoy support from the government. But we need to improve the targeting of that, but move the rest of the market who have capacity to pay into a cost-reflective tariff. We need to drive efficiencies in those distribution companies and in generation companies, and as well as in the transmission end of the segment as well, to make sure that those cost-reflective tariffs are also cost-efficient, that you're paying what you should be paying, and that there is no inefficiencies in the way that we're delivering electricity to end users.
Well, electricity and the energy sector is going to be in focus in the coming days as far as that policy and initiative is concerned. Now let's move on now to tell you that the Speaker of the Lagos State House of Assembly, Mojisola Meranda, has officially moved into the office of the Speaker of the Lagos State House of Assembly at the Assembly Complex. She was accompanied into her office by the members of the State Assembly, where a prayer session was held for a smooth leadership of the Assembly. However, Monday's plenary did not hold. It was adjourned to a later date by the leadership of the Assembly.
The road leading to the Lagos State House of Assembly complex is calm, with light security presence. Moving closer to the State Assembly, a few more police officers can be seen around the entrance gate, allegedly constructed with 17 billion naira by the former speaker, Mr. Mudashiru Obasa. A billboard within the area shows the vivid description of the new leadership, indicating a change of guard in the affairs of Lagos Assembly. Before gaining access to the Assembly premises, a security check must be obeyed by anyone and everyone. The new speaker, Mojisola Meranda, arrives at the Assembly and appears to be well received by her colleagues. Thereafter, a group photograph is taken, suggesting a united Assembly. She moves straight to the Speaker's office, where a prayer session is held on her behalf for a smooth run of things. Meanwhile, a large number of the Assembly members were present for today's proceedings, which was, however, adjourned. In the days ahead, and as part of her responsibility, the Speaker, Mojisola Meranda, will appoint chairmen to head standing committees that will oversee activities of MDAs in the state.
Oh, beyond that, the immediate past Vice President of Ghana, Mr. Muhammadu Bawumia, is advocating politics of inclusivity as he says the increasing fragility of democracy in Africa and across the world is now a cause for concern in democratic countries. He made a statement at the National Conference on Strengthening Democracy in Nigeria. Mr. Bawumia explains that the will of the people expressed through elections is being truncated by leaders who place their personal interest above national interest.
Strengthening democracy in Nigeria is the thrust of this national conference as political leaders gather to brainstorm on the way forward. Eminent scholars, policymakers, civil society leaders and other stakeholders engage in the dialogue to chart actionable pathways for rebuilding trust in democratic governance.
Your Excellency, sir.
The immediate past Vice President of Ghana is the keynote speaker, and he identifies the challenges.
One of the biggest threats to democracy today is what I call the next meal principle. Before I make my point, I need to re-echo the words of one of Africa's greatest sons, the distinguished Nelson Mandela, who said that as long as poverty, injustice, and gross inequality exist in our world, none of us can truly rest. End quote.
Beyond the threats, the keynote speaker, who lost the last presidential election in Ghana, calls for caution from the political class.
For our democracy to succeed and remain useful for the citizenry, ladies and gentlemen, we require a new set of leaders. Leaders who place national interest over and above individual parochial interests. Leaders who have no political integrity should not be in politics.
Vice President Kashim Shettima is represented by his political advisor, and he promises that Nigerians will soon reap the dividends of democracy from the present administration.
I would like to assure Nigerians that our administration is acutely aware of many concerns over our direction and goals, particularly given the difficulties which some of our policies inevitably generate. We are involved in correcting many defects in our economy and approaches to securing the citizen.
A former governor of Anambra State and presidential candidate of Labour Party in the 2024 general election shares his thoughts on strengthening democracy.
Talking about power grab, I'm not interested in any coalition that is for purpose of taking power. It is about discussing Nigeria. How do we care about securing Nigeria? How do we care about the common person in Nigeria? How do we care about our children being in school? That is the most important thing for now.
For the next 2 days, these stakeholders are expected to develop actionable points to engender civic mobilization that will ensure transparent electoral process, which has been identified as a major challenge to the nation's democracy.
All right, you listen to some of the statements that were being made by Vice President Bawumia, the former Vice President of Ghana, whose tenure just passed. He lost the election, but it was quite statesmanly when he considered defeat, even before the Electoral Commission actually made the final call in that particular election. Also had Peter Obi, the Labour Party presidential candidate, talking about power grab and all of that. So we want to talk about the issue of electoral reform, on how to ensure that our people, their voices are heard, because the conversation is an ongoing conversation. We can see examples from around the world on how elections can be better conducted than we do here. We've made some gains, but there's a lot more in terms of building confidence. But we'll take a quick break. We'll come back and introduce my guests on the program. Join us again. My guest on the program is the head of programs at YIAGA Africa, joining us via Zoom, Cynthia Mbamalu. Cynthia, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you and good afternoon.
And I like the New Year look, by the way. It's very bold and brave.
Thanks.
All right, so I was listening to former Vice President Muhammadu Bawumia of Ghana, speaking about the fragility of our democracy. And he talked about people, the leadership, putting their personal interest above national interest. But let's piggyback a bit. He did something quite phenomenal. I followed that election very closely, and things were, if not for his intervention, perhaps there would have been more deaths, because the deaths were recorded in Ghana, where he actually considered defeat, and that kind of calmed things down. Let's bring it to Nigeria. How do we move from talking about the electoral reforms now to ensure that our recruitment process is credible? How do we move from candidates' goodwill to letting go, or not fighting like Goodluck Jonathan did, to conducting an election where it is clear to everybody that this was clearly transparent and credible, such that we limit post-election litigation?
Well, thank you for making reference to Ghana. And like you said, when the ruling party at the time, the presidential candidate, Bawumia, considered defeat, the process was still ongoing. In fact, the Electoral Commission had not concluded the counts of the results counting. It took them two days after that concession speech before they announced the final result for the presidential elections. And I was in Ghana for that election. I think I just found it quite impressive and appreciated the importance of a transparent process. And so if we relate it to Nigeria, I would say for me, the first, honestly, is the institution that conducts elections. And if you talk about how do we ensure we have an electoral process that is transparent, where citizens and political parties are willing to accept the outcome, then we must begin with the institution that conducts. And I do believe that it is time for a new INEC in Nigeria. This year alone would have terms of tenure of members of the commission at the leadership level, both the chair, the commissioners, and even some resident electoral commissioners. So we would have vacancies that would require appointment. And if we need to build trust, rebuild citizens' confidence in the process, then we need to give Nigerians an INEC that they would trust and believe in their processes. And it begins with the process of recruitment of the leaders, appointments of people into the leadership. Our constitution is clear. For appointment, you need individuals that are non-partisan and that are persons of unquestionable integrity, persons that we know that we can trust their work. But we're also proposing we need to look at professionalism or the professional capacity of these individuals that would be appointed. Nigerians deserve appointment, an appointment process where they are part of that process, where we define the kinds of individuals we need to lead INEC ahead of the 2027 elections. And so for me, the first point is the Electoral Commission. The President and National Assembly have a responsibility to ensure that in these appointments, we do not have partisan, card-carrying members of political parties and individuals of questionable character appointed into that process. We need individuals that we can trust, individuals that have the capacity, and individuals that understand the importance of conducting credible elections to be appointed into INEC this time around. And so for me, the first is a new INEC. Nigeria deserves that, to rebuild trust that has been destroyed from the last elections and this time around. And honestly, what happened in Ghana was people trusted the process in a large percentage, which was why it was easier for a ruling party to concede defeat even before the results were announced. The second, for me, is to look at the lessons from the last elections. Electronic transmission of results still remains paramount, and that is because the results process, the result management process in our elections is still a dark spot for a lot of us that engage the process and for citizens who vote. If you look at what happened in Edo, the Edo elections revealed the challenges where the challenges with elections results management, where that process is manipulated, it affects the outcome and it affects the quality of the election. So for me, the second important agenda for electoral reform, this one now focuses on the legislature, so perhaps I'll call it the first, because a new INEC for me is not a legislative, is beyond the Electoral Act. is a bigger question on one, the process of appointment. But if we look at the act on results management, I do believe that we have an opportunity to review the Electoral Act to provide clarity on the role of technology in our results transmission process. Sadly, the Supreme Court's decision undermined that celebration that we had over the role of the iRev. For the iRev to really make meaning to us as citizens, to a lot of Nigerians, we need that clearly provided in the Electoral Act. So we want to have that parallel system, that complementary system of results transmission, both manually and electronically. And I think the third for me is on participation.
Well, let's stay with the iRev. We're going to go back to the appointment in a moment. But since you landed on the iRev, how hard can it be? What is the excuse that INEC is given for not using iRev as a valid, of course, according to the Supreme Court ruling or judgment, it's just a viewing portal? Well, what we're advocating for, let it be as important or as valid as a Form EC8A. That we collect at election polling units at the end of the day. So how hard can it be to make this happen? What do you think is the opposition to this as a matter of fact? Because sometimes we hear one agency of government say we're making progress in broadband and network on all of this is going across the country. We expect this level of access in terms of technology. But when it comes to elections, for some reason, all of that falls flat on the ground.
Yeah, I do believe that, honestly, if we want to get things done, it's going to work in Nigeria. Nigeria has the capacity, even infrastructure-wise, to support the iRev, the deployment of iRev in elections. The challenge we have is that we always want to complicate simple issues, and we want to make excuses for bad behaviors and for election riggers to always have a field time during elections. The iRev as structured, if we notice, the iRev function for the governorship elections and the state assembly elections. So the question is, what happened that it didn't work for presidential, but it worked for governorship elections, which is conducted across every state and every local government. So the question is not if iRev can work. We know that that facility, that part of the process can actually work. The question is on one, if we have an electoral commission that is independent, an electoral commission that is willing to get the work done, an electoral commission that has personnel at all levels that are devoid of political influences and are willing to get the work done. If we answer these questions, iRev would work optimally. And I do believe that as a country, we have the capacity to get INEC to work. And so for me, those are the important questions. It's not that we can't, because we've seen iRev function for governorship elections, at the presidential and for the general elections. It worked at that level of election. So the bigger question is ahead of the next election, which is why I began with a new INEC. And we need individuals that want to get the work done, that want to see transparent elections to support our democracy. And so if we have that as part of our legislation, we don't need to call it iRev in the law. We just need to ensure that we have a complementary system of electronic transmission of results, which does not substitute the manual, but complements it so that it provides better systems of oversight and check of the results. So that once you talk about collation, you're comparing what has been manually transmitted and then what you have electronically before the final declaration. It also gives INEC better opportunities to exercise its power in the Electoral Act of results review, where results are not declared voluntarily or where results are declared in breach of the law. But if INEC does not have that second system of check, it would also not be able to effectively exercise its power. So honestly, for me, on this issue, it's not a question of if we can. I know we can. It's a question of if there is a political will to get it done, and if we can have it in our electoral law. Citizens need to believe in elections again to trust democracy. And you made the point. This week alone, reflections on the threat to democracy beyond just the two former presidential candidates. And it's also within the West African sub-region, we've seen that if citizens do not trust elections, it affects their trust and faith in democracy. And if we want democracy to work in Nigeria, we need the citizens, the people, to believe that their votes are actually counting and that we're electing people that are democratic in nature. So yes, it can work. We need a law that makes it mandatory as part of the results process, but we also need an INEC that is willing to get the work done.
Absolutely, well said. And in fact, it was so sad that I think there was a provision. If you look at the iRev initially, you'll see that even the beavers, the number of persons accredited on the beavers will be captured on the iRev. But they removed that part for whatever reason, for some, I don't know, one form of excuse or the other. That's a conversation for another day. So it was as simple as saying, when we look at the iRev, the green also option shows that these are the number of people that are captured by the beavers. And so if we look at the form EC8A, we can just compare, but that is now off the table. So we don't know who is fighting, whether it's politicians. Let's go back to the issue of appointment. Justice Uwais had actually come up with this reform. And I think there was a debate in Uyo in 2010. That was between Teslin Folarin, who was the Senate leader, versus, I think, Olorunimbe Mamara, the deputy Senate leader, over, because the proposal said, let's take out the appointment of INEC chairman and all of that from the president and put it in the hands of the judiciary, who will have a way of advertising and all of that. Don't you think we should go back there in going forward?
Well, I do believe and agree with those conversations, Shelley, because, I mean, the Uwais reform, the report in itself is quite encompassing, and it provides a lot of proposals that, if adopted, would strengthen our processes and our institutions. And so, yes, when it comes to appointments, I do believe that power of appointment can be done by another institution and can be a lot more participatory, where you have individuals actually apply, you have citizens input in that process, and you have a separate, I mean, there was a convention around the judicial, the NJC, convention around having a different institution beyond the president. But you know, that requires constitutional amendment. So while I do agree that, yes, we need to review the power of appointment to make it a lot more participatory and professionalize that process. There's also the question around, in the meantime, while we push for amendments of the Constitution, which is a longer process, the fact that we have an election barely a year from now, by the new Electoral Act, by February next year, INEC will release a notice of elections. So we barely have 1 year to plan for the next general elections. So in the meantime, can we ensure that the appointment to INEC currently is done in such a way that we don't have party members, partisan individuals, people who have questionable character getting into the commission? But yes, I agree
but without trying to cut you, just a moment. Without trying to cut you, so just hold out your thought, Yolanda. How hard can it be to say, if somebody has been a party member, should not be in INEC for any reason? We've seen SSGs, we've seen political cronies. How hard can it be to ask simple? Don't you think we should just say, if you've ever served in government at an appointive level, just forget this INEC thing? Because we're trying to build trust to save democracy here.
Yes, it's, like I said, it's a simple process. Nigeria is a country of over 200 million people, and this is one country with persons with high capacities, serving both nationally and globally. The question is, if we're able to let go of our partisan sentiment and appointment. Now we have a system that is based on patronage. So you have appointments of people that is basically a settlement for political, it's a political settlement to get people in office. So you have people without capacity occupying positions that they have nothing to do with, which is why the failure of system and governance is a bigger question for us. We have a failing system and a failing governance and governance system because we are appointing individuals who have no capacity to head institutions because we're just trying to ensure political settlements are met. So for me, honestly, for INEC, if this President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, wants to get things done, if he really believes in democracy, like he says he does, then for INEC, for once, just say it's not about patronage, it's not about political settlement. I want the system to work. And I want to focus on getting the right people in. We have Nigerians who have the capacity, who have experience in elections management, logistics management, who have experience in legal, in elections law, to hold those positions. And so it can be done if the president has the political will to get it done.
I'm totally out of time. If you can do this in 1 minute. If the president or the leadership decides to not to do the right thing, we have a National Assembly that should check. Shouldn't they?
Yes, we have a National Assembly, and that's where the people come, where we come in as a people. Our lawmakers in National Assembly, both in the Senate and the House, represent us. So we need to begin this demand for a new INEC from the people. It's time to call the lawmakers to say whatever name comes, we want our voices to reflect in your selection, because National Assembly has the power to screen and to confirm. And so if the National Assembly can get the work done, then they can limit the excesses of the president. Honestly, we as a people, we have that opportunity now to begin to make the call, to make the demand. I don't mind leading protests at this point. We have to get our National Assembly to speak for us, the people, and be independent in their decisions. We don't just want a rubber stamp National Assembly. We want a National Assembly that really believes in democracy, because they are the hub of democracy.
Cynthia, quite apt your thoughts. As a matter of fact, so for the people who don't know, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu's tenure ends, I think, in December, right? That should be December,
yes.
somewhere around December. So we now have, and some national commissioners, their tenure will also end. So we'll need a new national chairman.
And Rex at the state level.
At the state level as well. So there's going to be a lot of fireworks to that effect. So we're going to put fire to their feet this time. We're not losing grounds on this one. Because
we can't lose. We can't afford to.
We can't. All of us have to do this together to save democracy. All right. Literally saying we will need to outsmart the politicians. Cynthia Mbamalu,
yes.
Head of Program YIAGA Africa. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, that's it on the program. Thank you for your time and company. I'm Jeffrey Uzama. You've been served on Lunchtime Politics. Bye-bye.